Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Sarah Backrack and I'm on the Speakers Committee and a Northampton Neighbor member. And I'm going to facilitate the discussion. Northampton Neighbors, just a brief summary. We're over 900 people. We're all volunteers, except for our exceptional director, Diane Porcella, who works part-time, about full-time and a half, but she considers that part-time. We are going to today have our speakers speak for about 35 minutes. Then we'll have a question and answer period. Everyone will be muted except for the speakers. If you have a question, try to wait toward the end of the discussion so that, because it may be answered by the speakers. But if not, please put it in the chat. You'll find chat, if you don't know, is at the bottom of the screen. And you can click on chat, you can write your message, and then just press enter and it'll go through. Also, if you have friends who didn't have a chance to see this, it's going to be recorded and you can see it on YouTube, or you can go into the Northampton Neighbor website and they're all our talks are there. We also have a new otter for transcription. So up in the left-hand corner, you can hit otter if you want to read it. And I think that's it for my logistics. So I want to introduce our two speakers, Linda Desmond and Kathy Service. Linda has a master's in social work, and she's worked with older people for many years since she was a youth. She's been head of the senior center. She's been a city councilor. She's also had international positions and has worked in Ireland and introduced many seniors to a lot of new concepts all through Europe. And she's on multiple boards, including she's a past member of Northampton Neighbors Board. She's also on the speaker committee, and she is wonderful. And we have Kathy Service, who is now a board member of Northampton Neighbors. She's a nurse practitioner in geriatrics, and she's been worked extensively in dementia, loss, and grief support for older people. She's on multiple boards, and both of these women's CVs are so long that I'm summarizing it broadly just like that, because I think we'd rather hear what they have to say than hear their amazing past. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thanks so much.
Let me just say also, we have Nina Kleinberg, who's our technical coordinator, master of everything, and she'll jump in if any of us get into trouble.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Hi.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there's Linda. And I want to start this off by first saying that age is the biggest risk factor for dementia. And we know with so many of us baby boomers getting older that there's going to be more and more dementia in the population. And thus, you know, the information, the bank of information that's out there on dementia is vast and it's incredible. And, you know, a lot of it is, you know, we're still learning a lot of new things. So, you know, stay tuned, I say to that. And unfortunately, we have only a short time frame period. So we're just going to be giving you a tasting of dementia, the information, but we're really concentrating on a new paradigm of understanding dementia. So I wanted to start this off, first of all, with a poem by Eugenia Zuckerman. And I heard this on a Saturday weekend edition, and it really moved me. She's a renowned flautist and a writer who's been diagnosed with dementia. And she shared her thoughts. So it gives us a window into how the experience of dementia. And my dear friend, Catherine Sanderson, who's a long-term performance artist, and for many of you who have ever been to Paradise City Arts Festival will recognize her voice from the announcements. She also has been a long distance caregiver for her mother who had dementia, who lived with her sister in California. So she was so gracious and accepted my invite, and she's got a great voice, to read this poem by the experience of living with dementia. So Catherine, please.
This is like falling through a cloud, like falling through a cloud. Sometimes when I wake up, it's dark. Where am I? Sometimes I know, and sometimes I have no idea. So I let the night spirits wrap around me. and they whisper to me, "Don't think, you will remember." I lie very still, and then suddenly, like falling through a cloud, I know I am here.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. So I wanted to imagine, I used to use this exercise a lot when I did a training on dementia. So this is Assamese. Does anybody here speak or understand Assamese in the audience? It's the language that I understand is spoken in Bhutan. And the way that I kind of phrase this is, I want you to imagine that you're taken up in an airplane and dropped off in the middle of Bhutan. Okay, with nobody you know. What would it feel like? You know, these are the questions I asked the audience who was listening. Okay, how would you feel? And then I think about some of the second question is this: what would make you feel more comfortable? You know, what kinds of things you get a little bit more trust in the environment? So with the first question, you know, more often than not, if people will say, I feel scared, I feel nervous, I'm really angry. And then the second question that they answer, they'll say things like, it's, you know, recognizing familiar items, familiar places, familiar people in the environment. It's also the people we see, you know, the person who comes to me, it's their tone of the voice, it's their facial expressions. All right. So this is what it's like for somebody to have dementia. They're like a stranger in a strange land. Even, you know, with people with dementia, it's almost like when you've gone to a really strange country and you're there and all of a sudden you come upon a McDonald's, there's that familiarity that gives you a little bit more, you know, trust in the environment. So this is another way to example to kind of think about. So some of the way that people act, the way that, you know, the frustrations, et cetera, it's being like a stranger in a strange land.
And I also wanted to say a little bit more about the strangeness of everything. A couple of years ago, the Alzheimer's Association offered a training on a simulated experience where you had everything was distorted. Your view was distorted, your vision was distorted, your hearing was distorted. And I had that experience, and what happened, it was very interesting. They gave you tasks, and there was no way in heck I could actually complete any of those tasks because of that, you know, being almost in another place with in another language, like you were presenting, Kathy. And the one thing that really helped and really made it real is someone came over to be my pal, to be my buddy. And all of a sudden, together we complete a task, and I could understand how to do things because that person was standing next to me. So what that said to me is how important those support people are to the people with dementia, whether it's the volunteer or the support staff or the carer. So I think that's a really important fact.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. That's a really good. And if anybody ever has a chance to go on what they call a virtual dementia tour, please do it, because it really gives you an example of what it's like to in a way, to have a dementing disease. So just so we're on the same page, I'm just going to go through probably briefly through some of these points here. Brain health. You know, brain health is garnering much more information and much more interest lately. In fact, the AARP, the Mass Councils on Aging, and even the Alzheimer's Association has webinars and training on brain health. And we're learning more that we really need to look at brain health as more of a continuum over time. And there's more and more evidence that is coming on about risk factors and activities that we can use to kind of protect ourselves throughout our lifespan. And you can see there's that little infographic on the side that I got from the Lancet journal. Actually, it's just recent, this past year. And it kind of shows you all the different kinds of factors that affect us as we get older and affect our brain health. And I wanted to add a little bit that even with the diagnosis of dementia, that brain health is still integral to the quality of our lives, no matter where we are. So living into helping people to live well with dementia. So the next point has to do an umbrella term, and I have another slide that I'll get into that on a very, very superficial level. And it is a diagnosis of exclusion. And that's the key point here. There are many, many different conditions that can look and smell and feel like dementia, but some of them may be actually correctable. So the main thing when people think about that something is wrong, the main point that I tell people is to get it checked out, because it may be something that's easily corrected. Hearing loss, something like that, or your cataracts, if you're not seeing, that can really affect on how we experience and interpret our world. And connections are just really key. And when I like to talk about connections is because the connections are damaged inside of our brain, and it's due to diseases of dementia. And it's because of these internal connections being eroding or damaged, blocked, if you want to say it, is that we really need to build up on these external connections, our connections with each other, our social relationships, and also the activities that have meaning for people. And when I talk about, some of the meanings, these meanings will come through in knowing the essence of the person or their life stories. And our life stories are integral. They're integral to helping us and building a person-centered and relationship-centered care and making life meaningful, whether we have a dementing disease or not. Erlinda, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, a long time ago, well, actually, not that long ago, but the director of the Ombudsman program shared a story about how important that life story is, and to know it when you're working with someone or you're supporting people with dementia. And she told the story about this woman who was in a nursing home in the eastern part of the state. And she was really having a struggle, very agitated. She had a medical problem where she needed intravenous, and they had her right next to the nurse's station. And she continually, and the intravenous had a little blinking light, and she continually kept pulling out her intravenous, and it was causing a big disruption in the nursing home. And the nursing home staff called her daughter, and they heard her life story. And her life story is that she was an operator for the telephone company. And every time, and in that time, every time you saw that blinking light, you knew that there was a message coming in, a telephone call coming in, and you had to unplug it and you had to plug it in again. So it was disrupting her life there. And I hear those stories so much past 50 years. So don't forget those years before dementia, because they're still a part of that individual.
Exactly. And the life stories have a lot, in terms of these stories, it all encompasses our senses, etc. So you're right, finding out and having pictures from the past, because people remember, and you can use these life stories, in terms of having meaningful activity with the person around reminiscence, etc. Then our environment, the environment, when I like to think about environment, I think of it being internal, meaning, our temperature, if we're warm or cold or hungry, thirsty, if we're in pain or not, and then external, meaning, how much commotion there's around, and even color and contrast, things like that. And these two kinds of, the environment can be your friend or your foe. You can use that. If somebody's having behavioral distress, you can look at the environment, whether it's internal or external, and use that to either help you to support the person or figuring out what's going on. And one of the things, I wanted to kind of talk about is that how the internal environment or environment does help. If people are, one of my friend's brothers was really actively resisting what we call in the ADL, activities of daily living, but care. And people thought, it's the dementia. This is what he's like, and they would keep, trying to work with him. And it was just terrible. But as after a while, people were trying to figure what is going on here. And it's, you almost like have to be Sherlock Holmes sometimes, taking the pause and saying, looking at the big environment, what's going on here. And what they found out that he had fractured ribs. Nobody knew that. And the movement, when they were trying to move his arms, etc., was causing him excruciating pain. So I think when you hear these kinds of stories, these are the kinds of things in terms of when you see a distressing behavior, we need to kind of look at what's going on here in the picture. And speaking of words, when I even talked about words matter down here, is that how we speak about dementia influences and how we support people and when I talk about people and their carers. For instance, even the term behavior, and I know myself, has a negative connotation. And it raises the hair in the back, and you think negative about somebody when you say, oh, that person has, there's a behavior. But one of the things is that all behavior has meaning. And I learned one of the, taking a class is that using even the phrases we use, like I use behavior distress or behavior expression in terms of trying to explain about people, what you're seeing with the person showing. And even the term used that we talk about suffering with dementia, that also perpetuates this whole stigma of a dementing disease. So how we treat and support people throughout the continuum, it's not high tech. Our meds, it's really us. So you and I always think about the incurable does not mean untreatable, and you are the treatment. Linda, do you want to add a little bit of something with this?
There's also this movement of sort of changing environments that such as there's an example of the Netherlands where they have created an extended living situation where there's a village where people can walk around and purchase things and have a certain sense of normalcy that are struggling with dementia. I was able to interview someone who did the kind of an evaluation of that project. And I said, so were there really some outcomes, some significant outcomes? And she really couldn't say, yeah, there really were some significant outcomes. So sometimes we try to make an accommodation that makes us feel better, but not necessarily worse for the person with dementia. I did go to a Jewish family nursing home in the eastern part of the state, and they created a real home environment, and it was pretty significant. And there was significant outcomes where people did not eat in nursing homes, did not eat in a dining center. They ate in a kitchen, and the kitchen was available all the time. And the entry room door of their accommodation was like a home. It was like a home front door. Anyway, so people really did adapt well in that environment. It's just something to think about.
Okay, so here's something that will demonstrate the next slide.
Oh. Oh.
Mary, a former teacher, has lived in a nursing home for the last 20 years of her life. And she suffers from dementia. As dementia slowly affects her, she is finding that simple daily tasks are becoming more and more difficult. Mealtimes have become a difficult and lonely place filled with small but insurmountable problems, which means she often does not finish a full meal, putting her at risk of malnourishment. But today, a friend is coming to dinner. Plate Pals mealtime companions are there to turn the tide against malnutrition by providing the gentle reminders and encouragement to eat that Mary needs so much for her well-being. The small Time to talk. A helping hand. Mary is going to eat a full meal today because you are there.
So let me explain why we put that in there, okay? Before we go on to the thing. When some of you know, I had the opportunity of working 10 years in the Elder Network for Older People's Network in Ireland. And one of the first, a friend of mine who was director of nursing of the largest nursing home in Ireland, in actual Dublin, was St. Mary's in the Park. And she said, so my role was, I was director of this befriending program. And she said, so what we really need in our nursing homes, Linda, we need people during mealtime. And we were all thinking that the real outcome here is that people weren't eating. So, okay, we can do that. And I was able to, this was a marketing tool for me to try to get a number of volunteers to work in various nursing homes. And it was working. But there was also a magic that happened, because what that did is that it created a regular interval where the individuals who had dementia actually communicated with their volunteers. Every single day during mealtime, they were able to talk to someone, and that someone knew a little bit about their background and introduced a sort of a different environment to them. And this one volunteer, his name was Tony, and I've been working with volunteers for 50 years, and he is my favorite volunteer of all times. Anyway, we used to walk 3 or 4 miles a day just to go to St. Mary's in the Park to sit with Mary for mealtime. For 20 years, she's been living at this nursing home and totally was not communicating at all in those 20 years. For a month, Tony worked. He visited her every day, 5 days a week. And all of a sudden, he was feeling like, oh, she's not listening to me. She's not reflecting anything I'm saying. And he was kind of getting discouraged. And one day, about a month after he started this 5-day routine, he got up and she said, and this brings tears to my heart. Anyway, she said, don't forget your coat. And from that point on, she started to communicate. She still had dementia, but she was able to verbalize. And that's what happened with our plate plow program. Yeah, people started eating more because they were socializing, and how valuable it is. And we ended up getting the Vodafone World of Difference Award, along with a $100,000 prize for this program. And all over Ireland now, we have similar initiatives going on. So that's that.
Yay. All right. We'll have to head back to that now after listening to the story, that slide with the umbrella term. So we're on the same page about dementia is kind of like, doesn't have as much meaning, or it's kind of much more wooden than what we were hearing. But I just wanted to kind of, not chatting a lot about this, is that it's an acquired syndrome consisting of a decline in memory and in other realms of cognitive functioning. And many diseases and conditions fall under this umbrella. The most prevalent is Alzheimer's, and even to the other end of the umbrella has to do with that what's getting a lot of publicity is CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. You know, the injuries because of brain damage due to football, soccer, boxers. That's all this is. So we're just on the same page. We could go on and on about this. So, but our next, we'll talk about some of the key points in the next slide. We'll be talking about, the world as we see it. We need to enter into people's world because it's different, and it's because of the damage in the brain and the responses that we get. People will often tell me lots of times it's not intentional. It's brain damage. And as caregivers, and my mom had dementia, so I helped provide care for her along with my sister. We have to be mindful of how we are, because how we're feeling, how it's interpreted by the person. Remember when I talked about trusting people in that slide, if you were dropped off in the middle of a strange country? You know, we have to have, you know, we have to kind of enter into their world and stuff like that. And behavior is not willful. So how do we, you know, learning about how to be caregivers and so much, and using, you know, key points, one of the things in terms of supporting each other. And I think about, you know, using a sense of humor too. You know, so using your supports and as caregivers, you have to take care of yourselves too. And there's this great analogy that I know a lot of speakers will talk about, the airplane mask, oxygen mask, an airplane. Put your own on. So you, in order to be good for the person you're providing care, you have to take care of yourselves too. So stress management and so forth. So Linda, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, Kath, I have a lot to add, but I think we're getting close to.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, let's go. I'm going to do the next one quickly.
Okay.
Okay, and supporting, I'm not going to talk a lot, but focusing on feelings, you know, because the brain, the parts of our brain that are damaged through dementia, especially the part dealing with intellectual and with rationalization, are damaged in most of the dementias. We really need to focus on feelings. And I'm talking about having a toolbox of activities and more. You know, there's lots of things, capitalizing in the cheap is this whole knowing the person's life story. Capitalize on these stories. And then I'm going to show you a little video after. We're going to have a video coming up that is making the rounds that rapidly shows the value of art. The arts are incredible. Music, visual, other sensory experiences such as taste and smell are essence. So one of the things one of the smells that has such much meaning for me is the smell of new mown hay. I grew up on a farm, and I feel like telling people, forget the Haldol. If I get agitated and I have dementia, I want you to bring me out and put me out in the middle of a field. So I know it's kind of, so also, you know, using things trial and error, and our rote memories are intact much longer. So keeping a routine and are integral to avoid excess disability. There's so much that we can talk about. So we'll get on to, we're moving this quickly along, but look at this video.
Normal, cariño mío, ¿cómo no va a emocionar? ¿Y tú no emocionas a nosotros? Bailando también. Hay que coger la punta, ¿verdad? Exacto. bien, madre mía. Eso es.
Oh, wow. So we're just gonna fit. Oh God, I almost can't talk after that. We're just going to be finishing up about the importance of communication here, and I'm not going to be reading these out. Words might be meaningless, but tone and feeling are communicated. And one of the things is that we have Daniel Callahan, who's an incredible ethicist, talks about that we have no grounds to assume that a person has the loss of an emotional life. In fact, the capacity and feel and exhibit emotion persists until the end in the disease process. And I just wanted to kind of share a story about my mother with her dementia. And my mom, knowing life stories, she was kind of a salty person, to say the least. And she wasn't a person who was very affectionate. And when we were growing, I mean, she wasn't somebody to tell you she loves you or anything. And, I found out later that she had been sexually abused by her father growing up. And it was after, when she was having dementia, I visited her in the end stages and sat on the side of the bed with her in the nursing home. And I was stroking her face. And I said, gee, Ma, I really love you. And she said, Kathy, I love you. And it was like the first time she ever said anything like that to me. So, I think that the walls that she had built up, to protect herself over all these years, the disease crumbled them down, and she was able to kind of, the essence of her came forth and shared this, so I can look at in terms of what does it mean to have dementia? That's what it meant to me at the end. Of course, I can always tell you other stories that were not so kind of difficult too, but anyway. So we'll just finish up with this last slide of talking about the communication, and we'll be open for questions. And okay, and it just in terms of what communication really is. So and that's the essence, maintaining the communication and the connection. So both Linda and I just want to thank you for being with us. And Linda, we have some other guests here that we want to make an introduction to. And
Okay, basically, we're going to say just a couple things, Kathy, because we are running a little late.
yeah.
Just a few things about the Dementia Friendly Community Initiative that's happening right now in Northampton.
Mm-hmm. And Dementia Friends that we're trying to work on, develop.
Right. So I actually have a dream, and I have a dream. My dream is, we should have evolved to a place where we're no longer providing a medical model for support for people with dementia, but we're opening up our community. And that's why it's a great pleasure that I'm going to be introducing Laura Hummel, who's the project manager of the Valley Memory Care Initiative, and Rebecca Starr, who's the medical director of geriatrics at Cooley Dick, and also very connected to the Memory Care Initiative. They're hopefully, with the partnerships that we've designed through this initiative, we are going to create a system of support that this could actually happen. So can we talk to Laura and Rebecca for a few minutes, and then it's back to question and answers.
Thank you so
Go ahead.
Just real quick, thank you so much, Linda and Kathy. It's been such a pleasure to work with you both with the PVMCI program and the collaboration with Northampton Neighbors. And I've certainly had the opportunity to meet quite a few people who are on this call. And I just agree so much with what you both talked about. I think the connections makes all the difference, as well as words matter. So important. And with that, because of this program, we're really looking for volunteers to help with this. And I want to let Laura explain a little bit more about that. So thank you both.
Thank you. And I second Rebecca's comments. It's been a pleasure to work with Linda and Kathy and the members of Northampton Neighbors. We have come up with a state-of-the-art initiative, Pioneer Valley Memory Care Initiative. And what it is exactly what's been presented here today. It's a social model of care that focuses on relationship and connection. And our focus is not so much on the medical or the behaviors of Alzheimer's disease. We're focusing on relationships, communication, and making meaning and beautiful moments in the days of the individuals that we serve. And how do we do this? Is through outreach, through connection with Northampton Neighbors, through creating a volunteer program that can utilize individuals, memory care volunteers from, for example, Northampton Neighbors, to meet individuals in their home virtually via Zoom, or when COVID passes in the home, to provide respite, connection, and relationship. Our focus really is on engagement and helping individuals to live well in the community for as long as possible. And so we're a coalition of providers. We're healthcare providers from Cooley Dickinson Healthcare, the VNA and hospice. We're affiliated with Mass General as well. And we've also aligned with the Alzheimer's Association, the Senior Services, Highland Valley Elder Services. So we have tremendous amount of resources available to us. And our goal is to create those linkages and to help individuals and caregivers who are often very stressed because they care so much for their loved ones who have dementia, but often find themselves so stressed and in need of respite that we want to provide those linkages and support. So that is what our program is all about. And what Rebecca had mentioned is we are looking for volunteers to support the work that we're doing in the community. So again, I thank you for your work, Northampton Neighbors. And what I remembered while you were speaking, Kathy and Linda, was a quote from Maya Angelou that, sums up this too. And she said, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel." And I think that's the essence of this work. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Laura. That was perfect. That's and that's what it is about. And and one of the things we are also looking at recruiting. We are really looking for in Northampton Neighbors, getting more volunteers to be a part of the PVMCI program and with us, and we're supporting people throughout, as we are volunteers, because it is a unique volunteer experience. So we're all working together for this. Contact, Linda or myself, or through Northampton Neighbors, and we'll be working with you through this. And I had one of my original slides was a list of resources, but that, when the time factor got kind of kicked off, but we'll make it available through Northampton Neighbors website, because there's a lot of resources out there.
Can I just add one more thing? I had spoke to Diane Porcella, and she had mentioned that she had attached our brochure to the invite to this. So if please check the invite, because it may be attached to that, and you'll be able to read more about the program. Thank you.
And my last comment is that both Kathy and I are volunteers for this program, and it's been incredible. And the change is happening, and it's been really something that has added something very deep and meaningful to my life right now during this crisis. It's really worth the effort.
I want to thank you all. It's a wonderful talk you've given us on not everything can be fixed by a pill. You've got to do a whole lot of other surround things that can be even more effective. I wanted to take this time to thank you and to also say that Northampton Neighbors has been affected by COVID like every other nonprofit. We provided many services and they were in person, and we're unable to do that now. So we've done things like we do telephone calls every week to people who'd like a check-in. We started the speaker series, which is every 2 weeks we have a speaker come, and they've been very well received. We're trying to provide as many services as possible. We did provide some in the fall of raking leaves or doing outside kinds of work, but we're limited. But we still do have needs. We're still keeping in touch with people. And therefore, like every other nonprofit, we really need help from all of you. If you've already donated and it was just Giving Tuesdays, we really appreciate it. If you haven't donated or you're able to do more, we would love you to please donate or become a sustaining partner. And here's Nina with our little inform poster that can help you out. But you can go to the northamptonneighbors.org and there's a donate button that you can press, and we would really appreciate anything you can do. We also do want to let you know that December is going to be a little bit slow for our speakers because of the holidays, but on January 8th, our next speaker is Claire Higgins, and she's the Executive Director of the Community Action in Pioneer Valley. And she's going to talk about, and I'm not quite sure I even understand, the false dichotomy between education and care in the time of COVID. So I'm going to have to attend so I can really find out what that's about. We're going to open it up to questions now. And please go to the chat button and ask any of the questions you have. We had one person who wanted to share her experience with her mother and a Chinese herb called bioessence, which she thinks was very effective. She wanted everyone to know about that. Someone else asked, are there any meds today that positively affect dementia?
Well, there are medications that are available for the treatment of dementia, but usually, I mean, it slows the progression of the disease, and people will still progress through the disease. And again, medications, have their own, can have side effects, and so, I mean, trying some things for a while and seeing how they help. But there's no magic bullet right now, but there's a lot of research being done. I don't know if Rebecca has anything to add to that, but in my experience as an NP, that's what I've been, my experience with that.
I agree with you, Kathy. Unfortunately, everybody's desperately looking for something, but nothing yet.
Yeah.
Another question. Oh, go ahead.
Well, again, making sure the person is healthy in other aspects too, I think is just essential, in terms of their feeling states.
Another question was, do you think that there's climate change effects or chemicals that have been in our soil and atmosphere that's increasing dementia?
Yeah. Actually, there's been a lot. I was just reading, I'm part of a CDC grant on brain health, and there's been a couple articles about pollution and noise, et cetera, that they think are maybe contributing to the development of dementia. And if we look at how the different what we call social determinants of health, meaning things like poverty and the kind of education and stimulation that we get, that also has an impact on how our brains grow and develop and how well our brains are. So that definitely does have an impact on from what I'm reading with regards to the development of a dementing disease.
Another question is, do you recommend or do you think that doing puzzles, playing chess, learning another language, is that really a preventative?
Well, I mean, according to, some of the literature and stuff like that, It can. I mean, but I think we just don't know. And I think for every individual, we're not quite sure on how it affects us. The other thing with some of this stuff, it's also the interaction, that human interaction, that connection that really builds and strengthens us, that I really firmly believe in, and seeing this. So we keeping our brains healthy and active no matter where is really good. It's important for us. It's like, I always think about brain health, like cardiac health, all those things, what's good for your heart is good for your head, all of that stuff. So, exercising your brain is good too.
How do you recognize the symptoms of dementia?
Well, okay.
Short question and a long answer.
With dementia, depending on people, mostly it's more in the beginning, it's like yourself, you may not remember things quite the same way. And it's also, I think one thing to remember is that our brains do change as we get older. The speed of recall takes a lot longer. One of the things I think about, if you can think about your brain as being a file cabinet, and over time you're accumulating a lot more files in your file cabinet. And of course, depending on your organizational skills, don't look in my file cabinets, is that you have files in a certain way. So when it comes time to retrieve information, you have to go through a lot of files, depending again on how your files are. And inevitably, remember too, is that if you're stressed out, like, I mean, I think about this sometimes. If you're, you have to you see a person and you don't know you couldn't remember their name, you get kind of frustrated, stressed out about it. And the more stressed you get, the less apt you're able to kind of remember their names. And then after you leave the scene of the scene with a person, you remember their name because you're not stressed out. So there are different things like that. That's a normal change of aging. And I think that looking at, and it can be subtle, I mean, and also at some point, how it affects your functioning and your way to be in the world can be. But again, I say, and I remind people, is that there are many things that can cause these kinds of changes, and things that are easily correctable. A B12 deficiency, your thyroid, different things like that. So it's always important, if you have questions about, even you think, oh my goodness, I'm getting demented, go to see a good healthcare provider and get checked out, because it can be easily and corrected.
One person said some of your comments were wonderful, but she asked even more, if someone with dementia is very, very agitated and frustrated, are there certain ways that you can redirect them that may be helpful? Do storyboards help, photos or conversations?
I mean, I can say something, Linda. I mean, I'm the one kind of.
No. I'm loving your answers. So I'm not. Again, I think you can. I really have seen this time and time again. If you find what that agitation is, whether it might be a physical agitation that they can't, understand why they're in pain, and they can't express why they're in pain. But bringing back some of those life stories. I have seen it time and again how it just calms people down. There's one quick an example where this person in the UK was a farmer, and he was incredibly agitated in a nursing home all the time, where he was so physically active, where he would almost try to hit someone with a bat or whatever was around. And then they found out that he had been a farmer. So what they did, and this was a care worker, this wasn't a PhD person, but what he did, this care worker put eggs all around the atrium in the nursing home. And every day this man would go and pick up the eggs, and the agitation went away. He was calm, and there was a quality of life that he was experiencing that he hadn't experienced in a number of years. There's creativity that has to go along with that.
And, don't argue. I mean, I think the thing about it is like not to, and you have to enter their world. People would say to me, with my mom, it was like, when she'd come over and stay with me, and she'd get up in the middle of the night and want to go home to Chicopee. I live in Northampton, and, you know, can't say, oh my, you know, blah, blah, blah. And fine, you know, I can remember getting up and saying, okay, let's go. So there we are in our pajamas, walking down almost like the center of Northampton. She's with her walker, I'm walking with her, we're going to Chicopee. And then thank goodness it started raining. And I'm like, well, Ma, it's raining now. Let's go back home. And oh, fine. You know, it was, yeah, it's like you have to kind of like think about those things, and it's a different way of thinking, and it really is. I mean, and it's not to say it's easy all the time. I mean, also to acknowledge that it might not be you know, easy for the caregivers, and for obviously for the person with the dementing disease. It is. But I think our compassion and how we treat each other, and people are so astute in reading your own feeling tone, you know, and she would react to me even though I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be this expert, and I'm right.
Someone suggested that we get a geriatrician to speak, and Naomi, the head of our speakers committee and board member at Northampton Neighbors, wanted to point out that Rebecca Starr, who is the geriatrician, has done a talk for Northampton Neighbors, and you can get it on our website or on YouTube. And it was an excellent talk. We appreciated it. We also, Julie, I'm assuming it's Julie Abramson, said that she has a wonderful story to share. Julie, do you want to share? Julie, are you still here?
Yes, I just unmuted myself. Did I? Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Well, I was working as a social worker on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, St. Luke's Hospital. And I had a gentleman who just lay in his bed like a board and didn't talk and he just seemed to be gone cognitively. He just didn't seem present at all. But I kept going. I was making arrangements with his various sisters who were all over the country about a plan for his care. And I kept coming every day and talking very briefly to him about it, but sort of thinking I was making no impact, but that the sense of being there and of coming and of attending might have some impact. And finally, I went and told him that he was going to be going to the Wayne Health Related Facility in the Bronx. And to my amazement, he said, oh, I know that place. I mean, those were the most words he had said at all. And I said, so what did you think about it? And he said, well, it's okay. It's just a little close to the funeral parlor.
That's great.
But I said, well, a lot of people feel that way about nursing homes. But he was gone. I just had that moment.
That was great. Excellent.
A woman, Mary, said a suggestion about communication is never use the word remember.
Sure. Don't be
Would
quizzing.
you guys agree?
Oh my gosh, you know, and we'll ask, and who are we trying to support ourselves? It's like, remember this, and that, you know, that can be so frustrating and demoralizing to people. So Marcy, you're right, exactly that. You know,
it increases anxiety.
Yeah, you know, it does. I mean, sometimes people say to me, oh, I mean, do you remember this? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't remember that. But it is, I think so. And, you know, somebody had mentioned something in the comments about, there's a number of, you know, some support. The Family Alliance, Caregiving Alliance is great. The Alzheimer's Association has so much available. And, you know, when I have questions about things, and, you know, there's a lot of stuff coming out in the media about Alzheimer's disease, and some of it may not be totally accurate. So just like with COVID, check your sources and always kind of update with the Alzheimer's Association, because they'll know what's currently available. At one point, you know, I had one of the people I was working with, you know, they wanted to use pot, and I'm like, well, I don't know about you. So I called up the Alzheimer's Association and asked what you know, they thought about using marijuana and with people with dementia. So, I mean, I think it's really, it's important to, get informed and always find the right sort, get, and I say accurate, but get the right information, because there is a lot out there. People can be taken for rides everywhere. So to be aware of that, and use good supports. I mean, we're out there. There's a lot of us, Rebecca and the people in the geriatric service, those of Linda and myself, Northampton neighbors. And if we don't know something, and none of us are experts on everything, but we can find out.
And speaking of it, one of the benefits of COVID, if we can find a benefit, is the fact that we're doing Zooms. And so we are an international group. Linda said that a few of her Scottish friends are here, and someone from DC wrote a comment in the chat room and said, in DC, she hasn't found people as progressive as up here. And can either of you make recommendations for groups or individuals who may have this kind of thinking on how you approach dementia in the DC area, or how she would find it out or he would find it out?
Well, I would probably, first of all, the Alzheimer's Association has information. I also do think, there are people, I'd have to kind of put my thinking cap on. I know people down in DC, but it's just a more of a different specialty group. But I'm sure we can maybe figure out, and we could be in touch if somebody wants to connect with us, find out who in the DC area might be. But I think the kind of paradigm shift that we're talking about is getting much more, I used to say acceptance, but is getting much more appreciation from people. Unfortunately, not as much as we'd like to, but I do think, and a lot of it also comes from persons, people who are self-advocates with the dementing diseases. But Marcy reminds people, reminding me about the Alzheimer's Association's care consultation. So in the, everywhere, the Alzheimer's Association actually has a care consultation program. So, checking in with them too is a perfect way to kind of look at, trying to get more access to different resources.
I think that's the end of the questions that we have, and we're running out of time, so it may have been perfectly timed. Do we have any last questions? Get them in the chat room really quickly. Otherwise, I'll say thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Rebecca and Laura, for joining us. This has been wonderful.
Well, we just thank you. It's really important. We're all, we got to take care of each other, and it's really important during times like this. And we are there, and Northampton Neighbors is there, and I know that Linda would echo what I'm saying.
Yep. And
I'm going to just say, go ahead, Linda.
One more thing, that this is, I'm very impressed by the number of people that attended because they want to learn, and we want to share some of our knowledge. And Kathy is just incredible fountain of knowledge. But I keep thinking that what are we evolving to? Can we truly create a safe, supported neighborhood or environment? And I think we're almost there. And if wouldn't it be lovely to have a dementia friend walk by and know that Susie needs a walk, and Joe, the carer, needs a few minutes alone too. So I think we could do this in a very creative way, and also utilize our colleges too. Anyway, so that's just the beginning, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I do think, thinking of what you're saying about dementia friends, there was a comment about earlier stages. If we, and I've been trained, there's a whole program called Dementia Friends, and we're hoping with Northampton Neighbors we're going to be doing this more. But even being trained, kind of being a friend, and I agree with you, Linda. It's like it's part of who we are as citizens and individuals who live in neighbors and caring about each other. So if we have a knowledge and understanding about what it means to have dementia, and then how do we support people, everybody, no matter where they are in the process, that's the key.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I did learn some good things, good tips. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Gillian.
That was great. Thank you.